when your first Unbound was in 2019, right?
Yeah.
When you did Unbound for the first time, I feel like gravel racing wasn't as popular or prominent as it is now, and you were also still a world tour rider at that time. Like, what drew you to the race then to
Yeah,
give it
that
a try?
was my first ever gravel race. And I mean, I'd ridden growing up in Australia. I'd ridden a lot of like gravel roads on my road bike and done a few like bikepacking trips where we'd sort of do gravel roads and that, but never like an event. Um, and that was like the big gravel race that we'd heard about. Um, and just the distance, and then the setting, and it just seemed like the perfect place to go and see what gravel racing was all about. So yeah, that kind of drew us in. Uh, to be honest, we didn't really know what we were getting in for. It was like Alex Howes, Taylor Fitty, and myself. And I remember I'd been like sick that week because we just finished Tour of California, and I got there the day before, and we were trying to sort out bikes, work out what we were going to bring. We had all this stuff. We had like t-shirts that were just like really hot
Yeah.
and also like flapping in the breeze. Um, and I woke up. We woke up late. I didn't even have breakfast. I was just sort of like went down and we just started this event, and then yeah, we were in for it. But I loved it. The fact that like we all kind of kicked off on the start there, and there's like a few thousand people rolling out. As the sun's coming up, and then eventually it just turned into an absolute slogfest, and Colin just destroyed us, and then Housie and I like found each other and just grovelled our way to the finish, but just like had this feeling afterwards, this like glow of like, man, that was just like an epic day. Um,
Right.
that I hadn't had that feeling at a bike race in a long time. I don't know if I'd had it before, so I think like right after it finished, I was like, man, that was hard. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I could do that again. And then like woke up the next morning and was like, okay, yeah, I'd love to come back to this.
So it sounds like there was a contrast then, like because you were still world tour, you weren't feeling that way after you were doing the regular professional races, the grand
Yeah,
tours, and
it's just very different, because like the the world tour racing, it's like you have a job essentially to do, every day, and then you kind of judge how you feel about the race depending on how you executed your job. Whether your job was to finish it off and get a result, or help someone in a certain part of the race, or get into a breakaway, whatever it is, you have a job to do. Um, Essentially, just as like a paid rider, which I enjoy aspects of that. Like there's certain um, pressure situations where the intensity is really high, and it's a cool feeling to be able to execute, a job and perform the way you want. But it's different than just like getting out there into the sort of unknown and putting yourself like in a race with so many variables and such chaotic situations, and then just like doing it with 1,000 other people who have a regular job and
right,
just
right, right.
are just stoked to get to the finish line, and that kind of energy is just it's very different, and I think like um, my personality, I'm more drawn to that, um, and at that point, yeah, like I enjoyed the contrast between the two races, but I think just over time, increasingly, I just gravitated more towards events, kind of like Unbound, where um, it was that I would get that feeling, showing up to races, and it became more difficult, I think, to like switch into that kind of killer mentality that you need for World Tour racing.
And was EF supportive of you doing that first event? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
okay,
Like all of that. We did 4 races that year, 4 or 5 races outside of the road calendar that year. Which like Rafa had come on board. That was my first year with the team, and they wanted to do something different. And I like, yeah, was really behind it. It was like, I'll do them all. Put me in, and yeah, like that first year at Unbound, EF sent like a crew of employees and set up like a water station, and like they loved it. And it was nice that like um, they saw the value in it, as a team. Because like uh, it'd be like an F1 team, you know, sort of showing up to a go-kart race or like a derby, like
right, right, right.
uh, like it's a very different um, avenue than they used to kind of approaching. But yeah, they gave full support, and it was nice that even though we didn't go out there and just win, there was value to them in us being there. And then for us as athletes, especially Alex and I, we sort of started to thrive in that environment. So it just worked like pretty organically. Like there wasn't a huge sort of plan that I was aware of. We were just sort of making it up as we went. But the team were right behind it, which yeah, I feel very lucky to have had that support.
Yeah, and I think now if we look at the sport and how much gravel has blown up, like of course it makes sense for a world tour team to maybe support a rider to do it. But I feel like back then it was more of a risk, and that's really cool. Like they supported you guys doing these kind of, I guess, alternate calendar events, because the ROI, I guess, so to speak, wasn't so prominent or concrete as it is now with these huge gravel events that we have.
Yeah, and it's nice that like um, we had the opportunity to kind of be involved in it at a time when it was still uh, developing, like a long way from where it is now, and seeing that and being part of that progression, I guess. It's it's been a cool journey to sort of be on.
And how much, I mean, to that point, like how much do you feel like gravel has changed in just 5 years from when you first started
Uh,
doing this?
yeah, it's kind of night and day. Um, I think there's so many different factors that have led to where it is now. I think in the US, the road racing has become increasingly difficult. It's been hard to put on races, so a lot of races have disappeared, and there's a lot of young, ambitious bike riders who want to race, and gravel is like a really good avenue for that, because there are races popping up everywhere. They're getting bigger, and then I think a lot of recreational cyclists prefer to ride, out of traffic, off road, have the option to take a bike where they want it, which has meant the industry, bike manufacturers have really taken notice and started to push, that discipline and get behind it, which means more support for riders to race it full time and make a career of it. So then it just slowly becomes more professional. The
Right.
races they start to mean more. People start to approach them in a way you would any professional sporting event. So um, it's it's kind of just incrementally gotten quicker and more professional and yeah, just more intense. Which it's kind of inevitable. I think any sport where um, people are trying to win, it's always going to ratchet up. So I'm not like I've just sort of been a fly on the wall for it, and have been incrementally like I enjoy racing at the front of bike races still. It's fun
Right.
to be. I enjoy that intensity, um, and want to go and be a part of the race. Like still, I'm sure at some point that'll shift, and I'll be happy enough letting that front group go and just having my day out. But um, with that ambition, just means that you to keep up, you kind of have to slowly increase the preparation yourself to a point where I'd say like when I kind of stepped out of World Tour racing, like whatever it was full time, let's say 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, the level is pretty similar now in gravel to what that was there. In those years, like World Tour racing is also, um, gotten faster and more professional, and everything's increased at the same rate. So it's still, um, you know, at another crazy level. But yeah, it's definitely like, I mean, going to Unbound this year and seeing like how massive that group was, and like just how like intense it was. It was pretty cool. There's like a chopper in the air and there's motorbikes and like, but it's still like the cool thing is it's still chaos. Like I don't think there'll ever be a way to make gravel racing as controlled as like a road environment. So it'll always have that kind of um, wild edge, and it's more than a fitness test. It's like there's a lot of factors that go into being a good gravel racer, um,
Yeah.
and the fact that it's like you're just like on some farm roads out in the middle of Kansas, like ripping around. Just
Yeah.
I still think that element of it is very, you know, um, it's very cool and still very appealing. And the fact that like when you hang out at the finish line afterwards, there's still those same few thousand bike riders who are coming in, like ticking their own goals with that same sense of achievement, um, and same satisfaction as it is to win, at the front. And that is still like thriving and well. So I think, yeah, on the whole, it's evolved a lot, and I'm sure it will continue to evolve. But um, it's in a cool spot. I think. Like if there's any part of cycling that I would have hoped to have seen, you know, gain interest and momentum, it would be that gravel space, because I think there's so much that people can get out of it. I think as long as it doesn't become too overly focused on the elite portion of it, and maintains that you know um, kind of open door where anyone can come and get involved, then I think it'll stay in a good spot.
I agree. And I think, like to your point, I think we just had the fastest Giro, and then this year we had the fastest Unbound, if I'm right on that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's cool. Like now that you mentioned, I'm thinking about it. Both sides of the sport are advancing rapidly, in their own unique ways. And then I think the equipment has a lot to do with that too, and the setups. I
hmm
know I saw like Dylan Johnson's setup and how much time he spent on that. To that point, what was your bike setup for this event, um, going into it?
Yeah, I love like playing around with equipment. I think that's a fun thing in gravel racing. Coming from road racing, there wasn't a huge amount of choice outside of like what depth rims you're going to run and your gearing, tire pressure sometimes, but a lot of that was just like pretty controlled. So it's fun in gravel racing. You can try a bunch of different tires and like switch anything on your bike to like match whatever the terrain is.
Right.
So I like, yeah, I play around with stuff a lot. The setup I used there ended up being pretty similar to last year, because it worked. It worked for me last year. There's always the X factor of like how much mud there's going to be, which like kind of dictates how big of a tire you can use. But last year I started playing around with big tires, mainly just like when I'd go on bike rides, because I wanted to be able to ride more like diverse terrain on a gravel bike, and like a bigger tire is the easiest way to accommodate that. And
Yep.
then through riding bigger tires, I was like, I actually think this is faster. Um, so I started playing around, testing different setups, and it like by my calculations, which were like pretty, you know, back of the notepad, like not, you know, lab certified, but I was like, I think bigger tires are faster. And last year I ran like a 2.1 Torino, like like a semi mountain bike tire on the front, which is as big as I could get in there, and then a 45 on the back, which was the biggest I could fit in the bike that was available to me. And yeah, I could feel last year, I was like, yeah, this is definitely quicker. Um, and then, yeah, we had a few new tires to play around with this year, but I ended up on that same setup, just a 2.1 on the front and a 45 in the back. And then had a contingency for like some smaller tires if it was really, really wet. But no, it was like perfect conditions. So I ran those tires. Anything else? I changed, like I play with my position quite a bit. Um, my I find like doing ultra races, your body kind of changes every time,
Yeah.
and you get like different uh, aches and pains that you kind of have to alleviate through um, position. And I'd had a lot of trouble with my back last season, um, so I ended up having to run my seat like pretty far forward. Well, when I say pretty far forward, like as far forward as I can get it. Um, and then I like having the nose down quite a bit, because I find that just like helps a lot with um, like taking any pressure off my back, and it just feels more natural at the moment. So yeah, I had to run. I like replaced the top cap on the seat post with like a reverb one, which is a bit smaller, so I could get it really, really far forward. And then what else did I do different this year? Oh, I put some short cranks on there, like a week before the race. I was like, I had this set of 165s laying around, and I was like, I might just try those. They felt good. So apart from that, um, yeah, just my regular Cannondale Evo setup. Um, I played around. I have a Top Stone, which is like their slightly uh, beefier gravel bike, um,
Huh?
and I was playing around with that at home. Uh, and I honestly think that was probably the quicker setup, but I just hadn't had a chance to race it, and I didn't want to like take the risk of racing a bike I hadn't raced before, on like the biggest race day of the year. So
Exactly.
you know, um, but yeah, it's definitely like uh, a fun game to play, like messing around with things, and where you carry your spares, which spares you need, where you're going to put water, and like all these little things that you just slowly gain experience over the years. And I learned a lot from spending time like with Keegan. We did Cape Epic together, but then also like, we're mates and chat about things, and the way he thinks about like his bike setups, course dependent, and he's just constantly um, puzzling with those things. So I learned a lot, from kind of observing the way he go about it, and yeah, it's a fun. Like again, it's not like the way I approach it, it's not like going to a wind tunnel or like crunching a bunch of numbers. I just sort of try different things, see how they feel, go out and ride it, and then just slowly hone in on, what I think is a good setup.
Yeah, I thought I saw a picture of you in like a prototype skin suit where you guys were running the water
Hmm.
bladder underneath the jersey, or was
Yeah,
that
it has like a sleeve in the back. There's a built-in, um, which yeah, they'd been developing for a while, and I was in London for our Divide film premiere and got to like test their prototype in there. And yeah, I was excited about it. I mean, one, it's just like a comfy suit, um, and I think it's like with the heat that you can get, in Emporia, it's nice to have like I think a lighter suit is a bit cooler because you don't have bibs and jersey,
right?
and then obviously like having the built-in bladder like system is it seems like a pretty obvious one because then you don't have to use a pack. Um,
Exactly.
but I didn't get it until a couple of days before the race. And then we started playing around trying to fit. I only had two bladders, uh, and the bladders I had were like big 3 liter ones that I'd normally use for like a big bikepacking adventure or whatever. And I couldn't get them to fit the way I wanted
Uh,
because I didn't. I just had the wrong bladder basically.
yeah,
And then I kind of realized I could run it up the front, which I'd done last year. I did last year because I forgot a second best. So I started the race. I was like, oh, it's all right. I can fit it inside my jersey. And then in doing that, I was like, oh, it's actually pretty comfy here. Um, and so yeah, I ran the bladders up the front, just because again, I didn't, I couldn't make it work, and I didn't want to change too many things on race day.
I feel like that might like indirectly help with the cooling too, since it's right on your core. If the water's
Yeah,
cold at the beginning,
yeah,
right? Like,
and I freeze my bladders as well. So like basically, you've just got like a 2 kilo chunk of ice that you can just stick right on your stomach,
exactly.
which was great. And then because of like the heat your body's generating, the bladder kind of melts at a rate that's the same as what you're drinking almost. So like you sort of always have cold water coming through.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think it works well. And again, it's like it's something if as long as you've got a tight jersey, anyone can kind of do that. Um, but yeah, I'm looking forward to playing around with the suit uh, now that I have it and finding a bladder that makes it work properly and also don't look so like terrible with a huge bladder stuck down in front of my jersey.
yeah. Um, Talk to me about like what. How are you training? How did you train for this year's Unbound? Are you doing structured training? Or are you just like I'm gonna go out and do a bunch of volume?
Yeah, I've worked with Dennis Van Winden he's been my coach for about 18 months. Before that, I didn't have a coach for a number of years, and just through that process of like I said, I wanted to be able to race at the front still. I enjoyed racing more when you know um, I'm in the race, and
Just
as the
more fun.
level kind of increased, yeah, and I was like, I'm gonna uh, invest my time in going to these races. I need to be like capable of doing that if I want to enjoy it the way I do. So yeah, we found like a sweet spot of like I he knows that uh the I'm pretty I'm not like super data driven, and I like to ride a lot on feel, and I enjoy the days that I don't have structured training. I can just go out for a bunch of hours and go and ride my bike. That's kind of a big part of my training. So we'll like factor in, intensity when it's like very necessary, but um, I don't get like too caught up in um, the numbers game of it, and I just sort of trust him that when he's giving me given workout that it's like necessary. So I'd say on average it probably ends up being 2 days a week. I'm doing something that's like pretty structured. Um, and when I say pretty structured, it's some occasionally we'll do a workout that's very like um, has a bunch of steps,
Yeah.
and I need to like load it. And then other times it's a bit more loose, and I sort of fit in just like varying intensities depending on what I'm riding. Um, but like we targeted Unbound like as like the main goal for this year, um, which it was the first time I'd set like a big target on a race, thinking about it already in the off season. Um, so that like I got a bit too into it, I think, in the process of getting ready for it, like earlier in the year, where I was trying to force it and became more fixated on the workouts and the way I was performing in them. And then, in races leading up to it, I was just a bit more like tense and in it, in the same way I would have like back when I was, racing World Tour stuff.
Yep.
And yeah, about a month out from the race, I was like, all right, I wasn't, uh, I wasn't like achieving the things I like to do on a day to day basis in enjoying the bike. And so I went to uh, Mexico with my wife, and we had like a little holiday, and I rode my bike down there a bit, but just to like look around and see what it was about. And then when I got home, I was sort of prioritized those big long rides, and then still did some like efforts in there, but in a way that like I kind of like to do them. It was sort of like, all right, I'm gonna do. It says I need to do like 4 20-minute tempos or something. Um, and so, I'd be riding and then I'd like find a hill. And if the hill was like 30 minutes, I'd do like 30 minutes there and then 10 minutes here if it made sense, or like just in a way that like felt more organic to me. Um,
Yeah.
and in a way that like I was just super, I'd wake up every morning like excited with some loop I'd planned, and definitely drew the line. And I do a pretty good job of like, um, you know, leaving leaving the training or the riding like at the ride when I get home. That's kind of where um, I don't like, you know, follow a diet. I'm not like obsessed about certain recovery. I'm not um, like when I'm at home, it's like that's that done until I go training again the next day. Which for me is like the balance I need. Um, and yeah, just like it enabled me to do a lot of writing, um, and a lot of things that actually work out as perfect preparation for Unbound, but in a way that it didn't feel a lot like training. And by the time I got to the race, I felt like I'd done. I just had like a fun month of writing, and I was already kind of stoked, like no matter what. So then that let the race be like not. I wasn't trying to force anything. I was just like, all right, let's just get out there and have a good time and see, see
I think
what
that's
shakes
important.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean when you think about, um, like I think a lot of people they look at like something like Unbound they look at the month they did before and try and think why they did well or didn't do well based on that month. When like to win that race, it was essentially just like the culmination of all the riding I've ever done. You pull on so many different elements for a race like that. Whether it's like some technical skill from racing mountain bikes, or if it's like some road tactics from way back in the day, or even like ultra stuff, like knowing that when you're fatigued and not feeling good, that you actually sometimes have like quite a bit more to give. There's so many things that come together on a race like that. So yeah, I'd say the training started years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to, because as you know, cycling is so regimented when you're training for an A event or a big race, and
Hmm.
people feel like, oh, if I miss a recovery session, the world's going to end. But I think your approach, more people should explore that approach, because if you're not having fun on the bike, then that's going to show up in your workout, and in the race, I think, as well.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that you enjoy and believe in what you're doing, and that you're like, you've got to realize that, Unbound's going to be 10 hours of that whole process. And that whole process is also part of the enjoyment you get out of the event, you know. If you don't like enjoy the journey of getting there, and you're kind of fixated on hoping that, X result will help you achieve that feeling you want, then I think you can, fall into a bit of a trap with that. And it's not to say that like everyone would enjoy doing it the way I do it. Like I know a lot of athletes who love like a lot of structure, and they get a lot of enjoyment out of, nailing workouts and seeing that progression, and that's satisfaction for them. So that's great, if that's what they want to get out of it. I think it's just like being being true to what you enjoy about bike riding, and then kind of molding that to fit the way you approach training, as opposed to implementing like a training structure that you then have to mold the way you like riding to it. I think is important. And just like constantly um, assessing your how you feel like when you're about to go for a bike ride. If it's like
Yep.
an obligation or something you're like dreading, um, then like maybe the approach needs like some adjustment. Um, because even when I'm like, okay, the structure's like few and far enough between that if I have a session that I'm like, okay, this is going to be hard, but I'm not doing it all the time, so I kind of get excited about it because I'm like, okay, let's see if I can do this.
Yep.
So yeah, it's like a balance that like, you know, I'd love to say like I have it all figured out, but I make the same mistakes, and I've constantly like, adjusting things depending on my motivations. And yeah, it's not, if it was as simple as like, okay, here's the thing you need to do, um, it would be easy, but
Yep.
that's not the way bike riding works. It's also not the way life works. There's so many different um, inputs. So like, yeah, it's like I feel like the the groove I hit before the race though was kind of as close to perfect on that as I've found.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you found what's worked for you, or what's working for you. And I feel like the result you just got at Unbound is a testament to that. Um, Talk to me. I mean, we know at this point you run the race. Okay, Lachlan, you won. But before this race started, like, what was your race strategy in from two sides, like for the parkour, because it was the North course, and
Hmm.
then on the kind of marked riders that you wanted to pay attention to during the race.
Yeah, I think Unbound's an interesting race in that I think if you have too much of a plan, you can get in your own way a bit because there's so many variables that can affect, you know, how the day unfolds. So I think being willing to adapt a strategy is like very important. Obviously, like the big ones are you only have two aid stations, so deciding what you're going to get where, like that's, you need to have that kind of locked in. Um, but as far as like the the tactic goes, this year it was probably twice as many people in contention as there had ever been before. So that's a new factor. Um, the course we hadn't raced the North course, and the only memory I had of it was from the first time I raced, and like I remembered in my head, I was like, I think it's harder than the Southern course.
Yeah,
Well, it's like it's more front loaded, I think. So like when the racing's more intense because you have more climbing and more rough sections when everyone's a bit fresher, and then it's more of a slow dying process in that back half.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, so I sort of started the race just like, okay, I need to race near the front and be involved and just see how it unfolds so I can adapt as I go. And then in seeing the way it unfolded, I was sort of like, okay, we need to make this race hard from a long way out. Um, if it's going to suit my strength, and maybe take away some of the snap that, some of the faster European um, pros, have. And I I took a flyer with like a long way to go, um, just trying to open the race up from a longer, but that kind of no one went with me, and then I ended up out there by myself, and was too stubborn to like sit up, and then I took a wrong turn. Totally my fault. Just like had my head down, cranking away, and there was like a fast left turn on a downhill, and I kept going down the road, and then the wahoo started beeping at me. I was like, "Oh, damn it, wrong way!" And
yeah.
then,
How far did you get down on the road on that road?
uh, so I think I had a minute and a half or something gap, and then by the
Uh,
time I got back to the road, the bunch was like on me. So
uh,
not crazy, but enough that that was the end of that.
exactly.
Um, and then I was like, oh no, and we were heading into towards like the Little Egypt section, which is like right in the middle of the course where it's always decisive because there's a few tough climbs in there. It's very rough, and you've got 100 miles in your legs, so the race kind of separates there. Um, and I just spent like 20 or 30 minutes just like riding as hard as I could into a headwind, and I was like, okay, I think I've made a mistake here. So I kind of adjusted and was like, all right, this section's going to be about surviving with the front group as best I can. And so I took a more conservative approach to that section, but realized when we hit it that there was a lot of people in trouble, like starting to feel the race, and separations are being made. And I was like, oh, actually, I still have the legs here to get to where I need to be without going too deep. So then I had the realization, I was like, actually, I think I'm on a pretty good day here. And once we came out of there, it became a bit more um, tactical. I don't know if that's the right word, but a lot of people just had made that front group. We were probably only 15 or 20 coming out of there. And normally in a regular year, that group would probably be only like 5 to 7 riders,
That's
which
crazy.
then Yeah, which then it's a bit more simple. If you have a group that small, everyone rolls, and it's like, okay, that's the race now. When it's a
Right.
bit bigger, you have like that same 5 or 6 people willing to roll, and then maybe there's 10 passengers who are either on the limit or uncertain of, if they start to commit now, if they're going to get dropped, or, it's just there's so many different factors. And I think also the fact that Unbound's such an important race for people now, they tend to race a bit more conservatively, because, if you can ensure a top 10 there, that could justify a whole season.
Right.
So I like, I'd been third there before a couple of times, and I was like, I'm trying to race to win here. And then, so adjusted my strategy to like, all right, let's just race on the front foot. And if I can get away from this group, it's now swelling and getting bigger, and there won't be much organization. And then, so we were sort of attacking each other, trying to split it up. Keegan, Matt Beers, Pete, a few riders were really sort of like committing to it. And I was like, I think if we keep this on, something will happen. And then Chad went away with another guy. No one followed him.
Is that
And
Tyson he was with at that
Tyson,
point?
yeah, exactly. And they went, and I was like, that's a good move. You know, I know how strong Chad is, and I don't think everyone was aware quite how good he is, but like he's won a time trial in the Giro, he's raced like 17 or 18 Grand Tours or something. Like he's a good bike rider.
Yeah.
And I was like, if he gets out of sight, we're never going to see them again. And we hit like a little roller, and it was Pete, I think, who had the gas on, and the group was getting strung out, and it was like as hard as a moment as you were going to get, I think. And so I tried again, and everyone hesitated just long enough that I got the gap. And then I was like, okay, I need to get to these guys in front like as quick as possible. So that was essentially like the biggest effort of my race, was like getting across to the front there.
How long did it
But
take you to go on to them, to Chad and Tyson?
I think it was probably like 5Ks or something, because they had a decent gap. I'd say they were at about a minute. So I was like pretty flat out, but it also gave me confidence, because when you make an effort like that, kind of deep in the race, normally you have enough energy to kind of start it, and then you're like, ooh, I don't know. But I went, and I was like, oh, I've still got good legs here, and made it across to the Chad, and that a bit easier than I thought I would. And then once we started rolling, I just had a feeling. I was like, man, I think they're gonna have a hard time catching us. I don't know,
Yeah.
like I was like, I can't see them getting organized. There wasn't that many people who looked really good in that group. I think like if we work together, where we've got a good shot. And then that was the strategy basically from then, just keep the gas on, take even turns. There wasn't any games being played. We were just committed to riding to the finish. And the only time gap we got was in that last feed zone, which I think were around 2 minutes or something. And
That's
yeah, I
a
was
solid
like, man,
gap though, too. Two
yeah,
minutes.
exactly. And you also know that you're like, anyone who comes across this late in the race and has to bring back 2 minutes, like even if they get here, they're going to be pretty fried.
Yeah.
And then it was like in the last sort of 20K or so, you start to think about the finish, and it's like, all right, how am I going to win this? um,
Right. But
'Cause,
you and Chad broke away from Tyson. How did you guys break away from him
well,
first?
Tyson, he flattered. So I got
Ah,
there,
okay.
and he he kind of looked like he was on the limit a bit, and he needed a gel, and like I had one gel, and so I was like, I'll give him my last gel, and he can, like, maybe he'll come around, and then we'll have like three people super committed. and then he flattered like right then somewhere, and like suddenly he was no longer there, which like sucks for him big time,
Yeah,
to be
absolutely.
there in the race, in the move, and have that
Podium
happen.
position,
But
basically.
yeah, but it helped us in a way because then it was just the two of us fully committed, doing it like turn for turn, and it was easy to commit, full energy to it. And it was the feeling. I mean, we didn't chat much, but the feeling was just kind of like, all right, let's put our heads down, let's get to the finish in front, and then we'll just sort it out once we get to town, which is kind of how it played out. Um,
He
and
attacks first, right?
he did, which caught me by surprise. He kind of laid off a bit, and I'd taken a long turn, and towards the end of the turn, he hit me with a bit of speed, and I was like, "Oh, this is going to hurt." And I like got out of the seat and kind of dragged my way back and got to the wheel. But also in doing that effort, like, um, I'm not like a very explosive rider, so normally that's the kind of thing that would hurt me a lot. And I came back a bit easier than I thought. I was like, okay, I think I've got the legs here to do this. And it was also nice because it just like broke the friendship,
Exactly.
like
I
it's
was
like,
on.
okay, yeah, now we're racing for keeps. And he's like, he knows. I mean, he's race road, so he knows like he made that move. So then, like, that's it. That's all the help you get from me, mate. um,
Did you feel confident in your sprint? Did you know much about like Chad's sprinting ability?
I knew probably if we had a drag race, he'd be quicker than me. I'm not like I don't have many watts to play with in a sprint.
Yeah.
Like I can barely. Well, actually, I probably can't remember the last time I cracked 1,000 watts in a sprint. But I can do basically the same sprint. If I roll out of the driveway fresh, or if we've done 200 miles, which helps. It's definitely
Yeah.
different sprinting after 10 hours on the gas. And the advantage I had is that I knew that finish very well. I'd, raced in a sprint scenario the year before there. And I also like just being there that week. While I was there I got in 3 or 4 days before the race, and I just rode that finish most days that I was there, just to like think about the different possibilities, the way different things would go.
Yep.
And anyone who's raced that finish, there's that climb, uh, just like a small little road climb that when you ride it in, fresh the days before, it feels like nothing, but at the end of the race, it's hard. It's enough to make a difference. So
Absolutely. The
that
nine
kind
hours.
of, yeah, that essentially dictates what's going to happen in that finish straight. Um, and having like been able to close, I was like, I think I can drop him on this hill if I just go from the bottom to the top. So that's my best bet. But as we hit the bottom of the hill, he stepped on the gas and kind of attacked, and so I matched it, and I was on the wheel. I was like, actually, I'm still good here. I'm going to attack like over the top, like kind of
Yep.
counter him, and went up the other side of the road and got a good gap. But then, I mean, he's just like a diesel, man. Like, he's got that time trial strength. He's just crawling back, and I was kind of like, peeking under the elbows, trying to see where he was, and I was like, oh, he's going to get back on here, and like he started to get really onto the wheel as we hit the finish straight. Um, but I also like that straight's a long way,
Yeah.
and you come onto the finish and you see the banner, and it looks closer than it is, but it's a long way from that like left corner to the finish. And um, I sort of got out of the seat and then sat down and made it. Well, in my head, I don't know how he interpreted it, but I sort of made it feel like that was it. I was done, and like hoping that he would take the bait and try and go right away,
Exactly.
um, which which he did. And when he went, I was like, oh man, that's so far to go still. I was like, I have time here to get on the wheel, wait, and then start a sprint, which is like how it played out. And yeah, just like one of those finishes where, again, the plan I had coming into it was different, but like adapting it in a way, it played out perfectly for me, you know. Like I don't think I was the quicker rider, and I'm sure like Chad, having ridden that finish now, he's probably replaying it a bunch in his head, and I'm sure when he goes back next year and finds himself in a similar situation, he'll play it in a different way. But yeah, that's how it unfolded. So it was nice, mate. Like it doesn't often go that way. You know, it doesn't often play out that way where, you know, you have the legs, you make the right moves, and you get to win, you know. So yeah, it was, and it's fun to like to win in a sprint. It's like exciting, you know, because
Exactly.
you're not sure you're going to win until you like get to the line. So you get that like, you know, sudden kind of rush
Endorphins
of
rush.
emotion. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, you were
Yeah,
super excited at the finish, rightfully so.
yeah,
Um, Congrats on winning that race, man. That was your first time winning it, right? And you've done it how many
yeah,
times?
yeah. That was my fourth
Fourth time.
attempt.
Okay, fourth time's a
Yeah,
charm.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
So, so how is like how's your relationship changed with the bike now that you are fully focused on doing these gravel events and alternate alt road, I'll call it, events? You think it's been
um,
better or worse or neutral?
no, it's definitely better. I like the lifestyle I have now. Uh, in terms of I have a lot more freedom in the events I do. So I get to pick things that excite me, and I'm showing up to races that um, you know I've decided to do. So that's a big change. You know, like so the goals you have are very internally driven, um,
Right.
and that freedom also allows you to approach the races in the way you would like. You know, so I get to do the kind of riding I like to do at home, and then tailor that a bit to whatever the next event is. But there's enough variety in the events that the preparation's also different, you know. So like that's nice. But yeah, I think in all, it's probably also just like a general maturity thing that just happens through, you know, having more experiences. And I think I've been lucky in that when you sort of well, when I stopped racing, like in the World Tour team, you're removed from that bubble a bit. Like when you're in that, you feel like bike racing is incredibly important, and you know, like it's serious business. But I think like now I interact with so many more people who race bikes, you know, because they love it. Like in the way that like you know they work a full-time job and they carve out time and use their holidays to go and do bike events, which makes
Yeah.
me more aware of how like privileged my position is, I guess, in that like I get to do it full time, and it's like a really cool way to make a living. So I think I have like a deeper appreciation of just that on a day-to-day level. You know, I get to wake up and dictate, you know, the way my days go. And like I'd be riding bikes, you know, if it wasn't my job, but now I have all this time to do it, so I get to do it in a way I really like. So yeah, I think it's been like a nice journey, and the biggest difference is like just the freedom element to really approach it in the way that like I enjoy.
Yeah, that's wealth, man, right there. That's really dope.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, it's not like I think now it's just not lost on me, that the fact that I'm lucky,
Yeah, I think it's really cool that you realize that, man. Acknowledge that.
Mm.
Are you gonna do Crusher and Natasha next? What's next for you?
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna do the Truckee gravel race in a couple of weeks, because it's just down the road, and then yeah, head out to Beaver, Utah for the Crusher. Um, but yeah, no, I'm excited about it. Like I think I think in the past you get a win and then you're like, oh yeah, I've got it worked out. Like I'm going to go win everything. But this time around, it's like I'm happy to have won that. It doesn't change a lot, Like it wasn't any like normally you in the past when I've built up and had big wins, it's like you feel like you've sacrificed a bunch for a number of months, and then you
Yeah.
get the win, and then you just want to like go and do all the things you weren't doing.
Yep.
Whereas this time around, I feel like I've finished, and I just wanted to go back to exactly what I was doing right before.
Yeah.
It's like I just wanted to get home and like ride my bike and mess around in the yard and like you know. So it's nice. So like yeah, I'm approaching the next race. Like I'll go there and be prepared. But it's not like this thing now where it's like, oh, like you're gonna take Keegan on again in Crusher, and it's like, well, I don't know,
Yeah.
just show up and race my bike. Like I had my day, and yeah, it'll be what it is. But it's a cool race. It's a cool town to go and visit, and we'll probably um, drive over from Colorado and camp out. So yeah, it'll be fun.
Good luck to you, man. I'll be
Thanks, mate.
following. I'm sure a lot of other people will be too. When we gonna get another Thereabouts though, man?
Actually, Gus was over here the other night. Yeah, I think it might be time. I'd love to go back and revisit like an Australia route. Um, I think there's so much cool stuff to ride out there that we just scratched the surface when we did our first trip. So yeah, I think I'm definitely ready for it, and I think Gus is also kind of ready for it. That's kind of always the factor, right? Is like if Gus gets excited to go ride, it's like, all right, let's do it. So yeah, we'll definitely get there for sure. But when, I don't know.
All right. Well, we gotta stay tuned for that. And then for anybody who's watching that may be seeing and hearing you for the first time, where can they follow your journey on Instagram or any other social channels that you have?
I do have Instagram. It's just Lachlan Morton. Um, yeah, that's my only social channel.
Okay.
If you
We
want
can.
to, yeah, if you want to see videos of me riding my bike with my phone in my mouth and um, blowing leaves off the deck,
Yeah.
that's where to do it.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me, man. Really appreciate it.
No,
And
of
good
course.
luck at Crusher.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for the chat.